I approach this theme a little bit from a selfish perspective. I'm talking about things that I'm personally interested in. First, I want you to meet my research group engaging co-design research from the Department of Design. This nice picture of us was taken last November, and some of the faces have already changed, but nevertheless, we are interested in empathic design, experience design. We're interested in studying the roles of design and designers and how they are in transformation. As these roles are changing, also the methods, processes, and tools are changing, and they have to be reconsidered and studied. So let's explain a little bit. This picture demonstrates what we did in eDesign project when I started my doctoral thesis in '99, and it has three main corners. I don't know if you call them corners, but anyway, users, product, and designers and their relationships. And what we were doing, we were considering how designers work, what's the creative process that they are doing, and how to capture the holistic understanding of the user in order to then design these kind of meaningful experiences for them. Well, after that, Richard Buchanan, for example, wrote about the 4 orders of design and changed a lot of our mindsets on how we think design can be influencing the world. And Liz Sanders talked about co-creation, and then all of the people started to talk about service design and design thinking. So what we see is that the design challenges today, it's not really evident who are the designers. We're not sure who are the users, and we're not even sure what should be designed. Well, one of our first steps in this direction was the Active at Work project, 2004-2006, where we applied tools that were familiar to us from empathic design. And our task was really to find alternative arrangements for aging workers. So how to keep them working a little bit longer. And what we did probing, we did observing, we engaged them and various other stakeholders to co-design workshops, video card games, and so forth. And we were able to identify quite a big set of potentials that could be influenced. Here you see some of them, from tools to environments, from work practices to organizational change. But what was clearly very visible in this case and this project was that in order to influence the change, it's not just us, design brains working them in there, but it really needed all these people, the aging workers, the bosses in the organization, all levels of the departments and all kinds of networks that they were connected to make this change. Recently, Lucy Kimball, who has written many interesting articles that I can really recommend, has said that central to designing for services is understanding the value and the nature of relations between people and other people, between people and things, between people and organizations, and between organizations of different kinds. I think many of these relations, or basically all of them, were already present in this Active at Work project too. And then recently, Anna Meroni and Daniela San Giorgi have been working on design for services and published a very good book on that. And they pointed out how design for services differs from service design. And I think this touches upon very much of the theme today, that when the design is changing to more open and collaborative, as well as the society, service design is like designing different kind of a product, while design for services is about services as human-centered relational entities. And then if we're going even further, co-creation here means services as means for societal change. Ezio Manzini, who's been one of the influential people talking about these issues, states that designing for services recognizes that what is being designed is not an end result, but rather a platform for action with which diverse actors will engage over time. Well, I think this statement underlines some of the things Turkka mentioned already earlier, the challenges that people trained as product designers face, such as our students, for example. It's really about learning these new roles of designers. the solution is co-created. It's not the blueprint that you can just put into the machines to manufacture, but rather what we're designing is kind of a platform for the final design. So of course we've been thinking a lot like what is our role in design and what are the new competencies that are needed. There are some who say that designer's role become more of a facilitator or someone who provides the co-creation tools. We've been experimenting with that too, and one of the platforms for that has been a very good collaborative partner, City of Helsinki. In the strategy of City of Helsinki, there is the idea that the services should be developed in a more human-centered way. And that has provided us a platform to get involved and use all kinds of co-design and other kind of design tools, and especially creating platforms for facilitation of collaboration. So here you see some people working with design game and envisioning the social welfare services together. But what we need to keep in mind is that to keep this focus alive, this human-centered focus alive, we need these kind of tools, what we in Finnish call ukkeli, and I haven't yet figured out the code, but these kind of little characters. There's been a lot of challenges too, I would say, and I think many of us working in this kind of field see this, that people who don't have an understanding of the design methods and the ways in which we work can be afraid. There's a lot of risk of misunderstandings. So building trust is really important issue in collaborative networks and learning together. And as part of that learning, we, for example, in one project, we delivered this kind of a toolbox for the City of Helsinki so that they would start learning these and using these kind of tools that are familiar with us in the future. But what we also learned that in when you are creating collaboration in these kind of networks, there's need of trust, motivation, common goals, shared language, previous relationships. And based on the interviews in these cases, some of the workshops influence these kind of good things when designing relationships. So the open atmosphere, lowering the formal roles and building informal ones seems to help the future collaborations. Following that same theme, IDBM students that I was tutoring worked also with people who are working in developing services within the City of Helsinki and doing some field works and those kind of things. The student ended up seeing that, okay, it's the very beginning of a project when members from different departments come together that needs a lot of emphasis. And they designed this kind of a toolkit. It's called Innoste Toolkit. And you see the names of the students there. So if you're interested in trying this out sometimes, please contact them, because it's about really coming together and thinking like, what are the goals? What are our motivations? How are we going to run this project? And I think this has been really fun to work with. I've tried it with my students, and students have been asked around to do this with other contexts. Here you see this Innoste Toolkit in action. One more example from civil case where the designers have been involved in a complex network is what we call Lauttasaari project. It's a client-centered service network, and it's part of the World Design Capital projects. And here you see visualization by Joona Elo, who is a master student, who tried to understand what is this all about, and how is the so-called käyttäjä, the user, what we say in design, but the client there in the middle. In this project, we used probes that we often do in design to understand the situations in families, their joys and challenges, and so forth. And the idea with this tool is to make people reflect about their everyday experiences and then tell about those things to other people. In this particular case, this worked really nice, and the plan is to use in the future the similar tools so that the families would reflect and tell about their challenges, and then the care manager who will then talk with them about the services they need and the personal budgets that they will have the same ground to talk about these things. And here you see some pictures that Joona has been drawing about the situations that we found from these everyday life joys and challenges. There are situations from loneliness and depression to some of the daily routines. So as you see, these are not just whatever families, these were families that require constant services and needs. And this brings me to talk about happiness. Last week I was listening to Pekka Mustonen, who gave a wonderful presentation about happiness. And did you actually know that loneliness can be really dangerous for your health? That is actually more dangerous than smoking. And according to some of the studies he referred, your attitude, the state of mind, can make a clear difference on your how many years of life you are expecting to have. And he also said that there is a potential of learning to change your mindset. This reminds me of a student project I was tutoring a couple of years back, and I was leading a course that the title was Celebration, and a group of students worked in the field, working with people, and then in the end they ended up designing a concept called Happiness is a Choice. It was a campaign where the idea was to support and facilitate interaction between people to spread good mood. And I remember very well that I was a little bit confused with this concept, and I didn't really know, and I didn't have too many examples how to tutor them. But today, of course, we are facing a lot of these kind of campaigns. One wonderful example from UK, NHS is an organization that has really had a lot of service designers on board and using their methods, using their mindset in changing the organization and hopefully, of course, people's lives. One of their projects is also about happiness, and they have five guidelines of happiness or something like that. And to be honest, and I hope I'm not making a too big jump here, but when I was reading those happiness guidelines, they reminded me of Tapio Vapasalo, who was our former professor, who taught us to feed our imagination and creativity in the creative design process. And I think now what I'm doing with co-design and co-creation and stuff, it's actually what we're trying to make other people to face as well, being creative and curious and try to change perspectives. Get connected. These are part of the guidelines for happiness, by the way. Or what Jane Fulton Surrey said already 2003, design depends upon a child's imagination, and we need to keep alive this natural curiosity and amazement about what it's like to be someone else. And I think you don't have to go as far as to all these great places that we saw in the morning to be able to try to find these perspectives. Actually, some of my students went as far as Espoo in the fall. Earlier I said that, okay, designers become facilitators, but I believe, and I'm sure we'll hear more of this in the next presentations, that designers can have a much more powerful role as well. They can be agents and initiators. And this kind of sensitivity, what Mancini and Rizzo, for example, have been talking about, is part of this being involved very strongly. In our research, we've been studying empathic design quite a lot, and I have to say that my point of view on this empathy has changed a little bit too, and earlier on we talked a lot about this inspiration and information and sensitivity to humans and sensitivity to the design space. But today, I think these empathic tools that we're constantly applying and studying, it's also about sensitivity to the technique space, meaning that the generative process and all kinds of tools that we are using are about communication and exploring together. And the last point there, the sensitivity towards the collaboration place, I think, especially when dealing with, for example, public organizations, we need to gear these processes and tools according to these organizations and decision makers and so forth. Well, sometimes this kind of sensitivity needs empathy, but also courage is to imagine change points of view and look at the world from sometimes surprising perspectives. In this picture, Pasi Mäenpää is looking to the Niittykumpu metro station, and this is our vision of the future Niittykumpu metro station. So not just blueprints, but also something a little bit crazier. Finally, I want to summarize that it's really important for the designers to step back and try to see the big picture and see the networks of things and how things are related and connected to each other. But however, I think the human perspective is essential, and big things need to be considered with this kind of human size frame. Thank you.